I know you were just in SoCal not too long ago. I missed you, but we connected a couple times this year, and good to see you. Seem to be in very good spirits right now.
I am. It's been fun. The road trips are done. People don't know. I mean, we usually see each other once a year for baseball season.
Yeah.
But people don't know. I think you had your first experience at Les Murakami Stadium this year, which I was really excited that you got to.
Yeah, no, it was really cool because it was a weird deal. It was the last week of basketball play because of volleyball. There's a volleyball tournament at San Sheriff Center. They bumped the basketball game to Wednesday. So the coaching staff, Andy Newman and his crew, they elected to fly on Monday early to get to Honolulu to have a full day in practice on Tuesday before playing on Wednesday. And you guys have a wraparound series against Holy Cross. So I got to go hang out at the Les, got to talk to you, got to talk to Kanoa Leahy. And the cool thing is that you guys are on terrestrial radio. You have an FM frequency that you're on. And I was able to sit in the stands while you were working. I think you and Harrison Kuroda were doing it, and I could listen to the FM feed, with no delay. I actually did the same thing this past weekend. I took in a couple of the games at Irvine, and obviously Mark Roberts has been there, and Alex Croto. They're on the campus station. They're on KUCI FM, where I was once general manager back many, many years ago. And that was a cool experience to hear Mark call the action as it's going on. Here's a weird twist. So I went to the Padre-Yankee game on Sunday at Petco. And so I said, Padres are on an FM frequency as well. So I plugged them in because I have the FM chip I have an Android, so I have an FM chip on the phone, put the headphones in. There was actually a delay because their radio signal is streamed. It's not a normal radio signal. So I had to listen to them on about a 20-second delay.
That's got to be kind of weird.
You guys are ahead of the Padres. You're ahead of the Major League Ball Club at the Les. So
hey, we're ahead of something. That's awesome.
Well, okay. So with the pleasantries out of the way, there is a 64-team tournament starting on Friday. It is NCAA, the Division I version of the baseball postseason. The NCAA Baseball Championships begin, and Hawaii's not in it. And the Bows, for those who don't know, I mean, talk about thundering down the stretch. It was like Belmont State, Kentucky Derby, and the Preakness all rolled into one. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, 16 of 17 and 18 of 20 down the stretch.
Yes.
They ended up 37 and 16 on the year. Were not included in the field. Now, the RPI, I think, was around 70, not mistaken, 70. So therein lies the question. So I'll throw it to you. I know all the social media that's supporting the Bows were kind of making a case for them to get in. You're a man of the world. You've been around a little bit. Did you think they should have been in? What did you think the chances were? I mean, you travel with this team home and away.
The chances were slim. In fact, I asked Rich Hill about that on Saturday when we did our pregame interview, and I said, what are the chances? And then, he told me, we need a miracle, and then he would knowing him in movies, he would lead me to a Dumb and Dumber line, right before he walked back into the clubhouse. But I think no matter what, let's say they don't lose that Friday to Long Beach State, giving up that home run in the 8th inning that put Long Beach State ahead. We're talking about a 17-game winning streak potentially going to the end of the year. I still don't think they get it.
Armando Briseño, right? He was the guy that. Yeah,
knocked it out to dead center field. It was a blast off of Alex Giroux in the 8th inning of that game. I still don't think they get in, and I think the West region really does take a hit. I mean, we listened to the selection committee on Monday, and their head basically said, we look at strength of schedule. Strength of schedule hurts the West region. Between where Arizona was and where Hawaii, I think Warren Nolan had Hawaii's strength of schedule at like 115, I think it was. There is a small handful of West region teams in between Arizona in that mid-teens and Hawaii. It is dominated by the South, the Southwest, a lot of those teams that, are naturally built into playing conference games against tough teams. So, I mean, from that standpoint, from the metrics that they say that they use, Hawaii wasn't going to get in. It was going to be a long shot based on the metrics. But I think if you used the eye test would have told you Hawaii looked like a regional team. They played like it. They conducted themselves like one. And from that standpoint, just, what have you done for me lately? It wasn't enough for Hawaii.
And I was looking at it. You and I tracked this the whole year. I believe there was a chance that the Big West could get 3, and I didn't think it could be 4. And when it was the weekend before the Matadors went to Hawaii, they were right there with Irvine and Santa Barbara at 14-4 in conference play. And down the stretch, they obviously things kind of fell apart for them. They ended up going 2-8 down the stretch, and it's unfortunate when you have those RPI opportunities. You got to take advantage of them. And I thought, hey, they went up to Oregon State earlier in the year. They had 4 games and they lost all 4, but they were in all 4. And I'm like, all right, what do you learn from Oregon State? And obviously, there were a lot of other factors coming in. But I'm going to make a couple of contradictory points, and we'll sort it out. You and I can sort this out. So obviously, the RPI is very big in college baseball. And a lot of people think it shouldn't be, but it's what is used, And I remember I dissected it last year when Irvine got left out. It was Fullerton was the only team that got in last year. When Irvine left out last year, I kind of went and dissected it. And remember, they'd gone 8-1 against the Pac-12, and their only loss against the Pac-12 was the last midweek game, which they kind of cobbled in there against the University of Arizona because everybody else was going off to play a conference tournament, and the Big West is not. And I looked at it, I'm like, okay, if we're using the RPI, then yeah, Irvine has an argument, but Kent State, who also was left out, had a better argument because their RPI was obviously lower. Now, Irvine, I think Arizona was in. They were a 48, and I think Irvine ended up at 49. It might have been in reverse, but it was very, very close. And it reminded me of 2014 when Irvine got in. They were the last team in. They ended up going to Omaha, but they got in because it came down to them and USC, and they'd beaten USC twice, and they got in. Looking at the way it is, and listen, and there's a lot of ways to dissect this. 11 SEC teams got in, and we both know there's reason for that. There's reasons for that. But that said, based on the RPI, obviously, as you and I have discussed, Hawaii probably didn't get in. But if you're going to put 11 SEC teams in, the argument I will make is, regardless of RPI, based on schedule and who they played, probably the top 6, and I include UC San Diego in this, I think you put the top 6 teams in the Big West in, and they would have held their own in regionals. Now, we're going to find out because Irvine got sent up to Corvallis, which I think was a break for them, actually, then having to shipped out to the southeast, and Santa Barbara's hosting. So we're going to find out a couple things about the Big West. But that's the disappointing thing to me, is that the Big West, at a point in their history, would get the benefit of the doubt, and they no longer get it. And it hurts teams like the Bows, who come thundering down the stretch the way they did.
Yeah. I think it's not just Hawaii, and I'm not going to be Big West biased here.
Okay.
I think, a team like Lamar, comes to mind. Yeah. I'm talking about 2 teams with the top 2 ERAs in the country, pitching wise, and Lamar, 40+ wins, and not in. I think you mentioned the RPI. We've seen other sports go away from the RPI. College basketball goes to the net rating. I believe men's volleyball's gone away from the RPI. They're using a different metric. Heck, baseball has how many metrics? I mean, D1 baseball has theirs. You've got the KPI. And I think
love the DSR. The DSR,
that's right. And if you recall watching ESPN's selection show on the Deuce on Monday, they didn't just use the RPI. They were using the DSR as well.
Yeah.
So they were putting that side by side.
DSR-wise, Josh, DSR-wise, Hawaii 42.
That's right. Now, I don't think, and my partner Scott Robb says this all the time, if you want to feel like you've got a good chance, you've got to be in the 40. You got to be in the top 40. Yeah. So if you're not going to be in the top 40, then your strength of schedule needs to be really good. And as we saw with the selection committee and why Florida got in, they had a strength of schedule of number 1. even though they were barely above 500. And I think that's the other thing. And I don't know if this was going to be part of the conversation, but the West region, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, I think the West region will always be hurt by strength of schedule unless you're traveling to an SEC opponent or you're traveling to a Big 12 opponent. I know Long Beach went to Michigan this year and got swept. I mean, Hawaii's gone to Vanderbilt. Hawaii's gone to LSU in the past. But unless you're doing those things in the West region, it's clear. 8 teams from the West region made it in the field of 64. You're not going to get a lot of help out of that in your RPI. I mean, heck, Hawaii's biggest jump in the RPI was after it played UC San Diego and Cal Poly. You may remember that, right? Hawaii was in the 130s. They jumped up.
They jumped like 30-some spots after they swept the Tritons in La Jolla.
That's right. And granted, UCSD has been very low in the RPI. I mean, they were consistently in the low hundreds. They were never really an RPI threat, but they had a really good record, and they beat UC Irvine in their series. So, I think there are a lot of things, not just for Hawaii, but for West Region teams in general. I'll throw Cal in. From the Pac-12. I'm not going to throw USC in. I know they tried to make a case on social media. I'm not buying it whatsoever. But there are teams in the West region, not just in the Big West, that I think do get the short end of it. And I think this field of 64 maybe showed it more than the last couple of fields I think that have been put out there.
I mean, listen, I think that the committee does a really good job. It's a really tough job, But I mean, listen. Again, you go back to my 11 SEC teams, and I understand that, the reason they do that. I always joke with Dan Butterly. He's like, you want to get more baseball teams in, let's just add football. But not saying that. Again, I reiterate my argument. 6 Big West teams could have easily competed in any of the regionals that are there. Not to say that 6 teams could get in, but it is interesting. You mentioned Florida. Their athletic director was on the committee. And, ironically enough, the last time the Big West commissioner was on the selection committee, and that was the last time the Big West got 4 teams. And I think 2 of them ended up advancing out of those regions. So, and that's the other thing, Josh, is that, man, baseball is a brutally cruel sport.
Yeah.
Especially double elimination. I mean, we always talk about with the basketball March Madness, but you see some wacky things. I'll never forget, it was the Cole Bauer days at UCLA. They're hosting a regional. Their first game is against San Francisco. And all of a sudden, Kyle Zimmer carves up the Bruins, and now they're playing in an elimination game on their home field. So things like that do happen.
Yeah, I want to throw 2 things at you. One, to your point on Big West teams and their ability to compete. I think UC Santa Barbara and UC Irvine, maybe more so UCSB. I think UC Santa Barbara is an Omaha type team. I think they can make an outstanding run. I think UC Irvine is a super regional team. They've had some really tough losses, I think, in the last month of the season that might have kind of, knocked them back a little bit. But I think they can get to a super regional. I do believe that Cal Poly is a super regional team. I believe that in Hawaii, just because nobody could score more than 3 runs against Hawaii, except for Long Beach State. That one time in the final month of May, only Long Beach State in one game scored more than 3 runs, and that was 4. And that was and that was in that one loss Hawaii had in that series. CSUN, I feel like their record's good. I feel like they're much better than that. And UC San Diego, I think, honestly, great bullpen. I think they've been burned by some injuries, but if not for that, if UC San Diego were healthy, UC San Diego can get out of the regional.
You forget. I mean, and Santa Barbara too. I mean, you forget. Hudson Barrett done for the season. Nunez, the shortstop, done for the season. San Diego as well. We're missing a couple of guys off that weekend pitching, that weekend staff. They lost a guy. One was done. Gregson was lost for the year, and then they lost their Friday starter in that opening series against Fullerton. But let's get back to the Bows. And here's the 2 points I want to make about Hawaii is I would love to see an SEC team in season So I guess they split with Ole Miss
Mm-hmm.
because they had that weird kind of 7-inning doubleheader, which people always want to discount. And I think they lost 2 of 3 in Honolulu to NC State, which is ACC. It's a little different. But how about in the middle of April, you got to go to the last in Honolulu and play 3 games, that kind of a thing. The other argument that's always brought up against Hawaii is, well, why are you playing Hawaii Pacific and Hawaii Hilo? Which I understand, but I'm like, well, who are they supposed to play? Like who are you supposed to play? Are you you have back-to-back series at home. You're going to jet to Texas for a midweek against the Longhorns and then blow basically 2 days to travel, and that's not their fault. You'd rather play than not play, so you play who's available to you, and there's no other D1 teams in the vicinity in Honolulu.
Yeah, I mean, Rich Hill, he added most of those D2 teams this year. Chaminade is in their first year of college baseball. HPU, UH Hilo was a home and home. And he talks about growing the game of baseball in this state. It certainly, helps in recruiting and all of that. But, those don't count against the RPI. That's why when you look at Hawaii's record, you see the 37 wins. It's really actually 33 because the RPI doesn't look at it. But to your point, I still recall that 2-week trip in which Hawaii had a couple of midweek games in that span. I think one of them was California Baptist, and it was a 2-week trip. It was in the middle of finals week that Hawaii was gone. And it's not like, oh, okay, we're gonna bus a couple of hours and then go bus back, and okay, you're back on campus and finals is like nothing. No, you're gone literally for 2 weeks. You've got your academic administrator who's out there helping to proctor all the tests and everything, but that's a grueling trip. Hawaii had several of those midweek games last year, and it can be taxing. They had one this year, which was Santa Clara, but that's also why you see a lot of those early season conference games extend to 4 games, like Holy Cross, like Rice, NC State. We will never know about that Sunday game with curfew. Hawaii was coming back, and then all of a sudden, unbeknownst to anybody, there was a curfew that ended the game in the 8th inning, where a lot of people felt like Hawaii could have come back and won because NC State was on the rope. So those early games in February and going into early March is supposed to cover up a little bit for not having as many of those games on Tuesday. I'm told they're working on a few this coming year, and I think California Baptist, I think Santa Clara is going to be one of them next year. I think they're working on a Southern California one next year, but it's not ideal. It's not ideal for Hawaii. I'm looking at many other West region teams. Unless you land a sweet spot on one or two of those, just getting games on a Tuesday doesn't always help you either. So it's really hard to juggle.
It's funny you bring that up. I just talked to Andrew Check. It's obviously because they just played CSUN a couple weeks ago. I remember talking to him about the postseason, and we got into the whole idea of them hosting. But he made a great point about last year. Like, we go back to last year again. They wrapped the year up at the less, and the Bows swept them. So there's an opportunity potentially for them to go to the postseason last year. But again, not an easy place to play, not an easy place to go play. So I think that somewhat is discounted, that people figure, the travel is brutal. I remember Troy Percival telling me the first experience he had in Hawaii, he said after that game, I pulled my, Justin Johnson was his dobo. Like, I pulled Justin aside and said, okay, next time we're on the road to Hawaii, no midweek game the week before and no midweek game the game after, because they had scheduled the Tuesday game after that series in Honolulu, which the schedule got messed up a little bit because of some weather issues. But he said still, we were dead on it. We got back, late Monday, and we woke up on Tuesday morning. These kids had to go to class, and we're dead on our feet. So it is, that whole aspect of it is interesting. And I think I want to ask you about Rich, because I do think, and this is no disrespect to Mike Trapasso, I thought was a fantastic coach at Hawaii, there's a different vibe with Rich Hill there. And I guess Rich Hill is kind of his own vibe in and of itself, but it just seems that there's a different energy. I was watching the series and listening to the series when CSUN went out there, and Rich Hill gonna Rich Hill. What's it been like for you working with him, and what has been the effect in terms of the fan base as well as the team?
No disrespect to Mike Trapasso, like the guy a lot. Rich Hill was very different, very much more open. I think he was not, he has a little bit of a filter, but is not afraid to tell us anything. I mean, heck, the reason we learned that Hawaii was in the potential NCAA discussion was from Rich. He was the one that told us that Eric Newman, who's the UC San Diego head coach who represents the West, was, on the advisory committee and gave him a call the week of the Long Beach State series and told him, here's what you need to do to truly be considered. Keep playing the way you're playing and finish third in the Big West Conference. And which is also why I say even if they swept Long Beach State, I think it wouldn't have mattered. But he's got a lot more energy to him. I think you come into an institution, a public institution as compared to being USD. You've got lots of things that you want to do, immediate things he wanted to make changes on, the outfield mural, recognizing Colton Wong and Les Murakami and the old team, what they want to do to the batting cage. Like he's got like the brain of someone that wants to go in and embrace Hawaii's past. He's got a good relationship with Les Murakami. He's got a good relationship with Pal Eldridge, who you see on the television broadcast and is an institution in Hawaii baseball. And as much of that, he's also wrapped himself around just Hawaii in general. He's not just coming in, and I think you have to be this sometimes. You have to come in and not just be a coach of a university. Hawaii feels a little bit different. You've got to be able to come in and embrace Hawaii and be all about it. And it's not just, Rich Hill being a surfer. It's Rich Hill. He's got the tattoos on him. He knows the phrases. He knows the meaning of certain things and what Hawaii baseball has meant to Hawaii for decades. He understands it. He embraces it. That's why to the baseball side, he knows how important Les Murakami Stadium is. In fact, he said, we're not going to play in the Tony Gwynn legacy anymore. We're going to, that would be their one road trip non-conference. We want as many things as we can at Les Murakami Stadium for these fans to see, to bring great crowds, et cetera. He knows how much of a cathedral that is in Hawaii. It is Hawaii's major league team. And so he understands it and he appreciates it. I think the other thing is that's very different with him. You see him involved in games more than many other coaches. The disruptors, if you will, the offensive timeouts, the many meetings on the mound, really for nothing more than to just be like, hey, let's chill. We're okay. We're fine. Nothing of real substance on the mound except to break rhythm. He knows how important it is to, as a head coach, really be involved in the game and his ability to do so, the intentional walks. I mean, we didn't see a lot of this previously. So his style, is certainly unique as compared to what we had in the Mike Trapasso era. And I think the last thing I would say is you see his connections. Look at Lindsey Meggs. Coming on, and one of his best friends, as Lindsey told me earlier this year, I think it was at Davis, he said, I'm on a vacation from my vacation, coming on and helping Rich. And in fact, it was just announced the other day, Coach Meggs will be back next year. To have someone like Dave Nakama on his staff that has head coaching experience now, completing 3 years, to bring in Keith Zuniga, who was an interim head coach at New Mexico State, to now coming here as a pitching coach. There is so much head coaching experience, and that's all his connections. That's all the people that have trusted him, and he has reciprocated that trust that has helped to bring the knowledge of the game, the execution of the game, in a way that we haven't seen. Because, also going back to the Mike Trapasso era, his last few years, his staffs were shorter. Coach Trapasso was also the pitching coach. He he didn't delegate as much. He kept a lot of it, I think, on his shoulders, and I think you could see the result toward the end.
It's what's interesting is in terms of I know it's an issue with a lot of sports at University of Hawaii, but baseball in particular, the local talent that's there, and you see it all over the Big West. You really do see it all over the Big West. And I think that's always been an issue with the local fans there is, hey, we want our local guys to come there. And he's getting them there. He may not get them there as freshmen, but I've seen a couple of the bounce backs. They're local guys, or guys maybe had to wait their turn a little bit. And he's got the local guys now. Is there a different buzz now that Rich is running the show over there?
Oh, no doubt. I think one of the complaints I think people had previously was that maybe there wasn't enough effort to recruit local talent to play at the University of Hawaii. And I think it's well known. The state of Hawaii has good baseball talent. Colton Wong playing at Hawaii was a great example of that. But it didn't seem like there were enough of those stories. Elijah Iquez playing at third base this year was drafted in the 19th round by the Texas Rangers. He decided to stay home. That was huge. That was an ability to say, look, Hawaii baseball is, there's a lot of pride in playing at home. Being drafted is not enough. I'm going to come here and I'm going to play every single day, which he did. He was one of two guys that started every single game, most of them at third base, first couple at shortstop, and prove that, this is a good decision for me, and it can be a good decision for others. You mentioned it. You're right. I know football has been brought up a lot with this, where, okay, you may be from Hawaii and you might believe it, and sometimes it might be accurate that you go somewhere and it could be really good for you. Then there could be a coaching change, or maybe something doesn't work out. And Timmy Chang, I remember, said this, is that, the door is always open. If you want to come, if you want to give us a call, maybe something can work out. Previous coaches in football weren't like that. So it's always important knowing that Hawaii can be a place that you can come back to if a Power 5 program doesn't work, or a really good program in baseball in the West, like a Portland doesn't work out for Jake Sukata, or St. John's for Austin Machado. St. John's going dancing this year in baseball. That, you can be here and you can be productive. Your career can be better for it. Iquez is maybe the best example of that I think Hawaii has had in quite some time.
And that's a testament to Rich Hill and him understanding, hey, if I go play for this guy, I can improve my lot. As a junior, 19th round pick out of high school, as a junior, I want to be, in those top 10 rounds where some of that money is. And, you talk about football. It's interesting. I had a conversation about this topic, and, college sports is going to change again, but it's changed so much in the last 4 or 5 years that you and I have known each other, in the sense that people don't always end up where they start, right? And I remember Tom Kraft telling me this. He goes, our recruiting, and he's the head coach at RCC, a junior college for a football program. But he says, our recruiting is about, we know who all the good players are, and we know that other teams are interested in them. But our recruiting is that, hey, Josh, I want you to come play for me. You say, you know what, coach, I'm going to give try my best to get a D1 opportunity. You go play, at Fresno State or San Jose State, and it doesn't work out the way you want to do it. You want to remain in touch. And it sounds like that's kind of the Rich Hill way, is that, and I've seen it, I've read it in the Brian McGinnis has a great job, Stephen Tsai. They write about, hey, these are the guys who are going to have the opportunities to maybe move on, but Rich Hill or his assistants have relationships with these players to bring them back. And that's why it's really been impressive to see what he's done in that program in just 3 years. But it shouldn't be a surprise. He's been doing this a long time.
That's right. Rich knows the highs and lows of it. And I'll finish the Iquez thought with this. And Rich has said this a couple of times in our extra inning shows that we have, that he is very adamant, and he will tell parents this in almost every circumstance. If you're coming out of high school, it is best to go to college, not take the pro route right away. He is so adamant. In fact, he told me, hey, when the draft comes on, make sure I'm on your show, because he's going to just let that out. He is so passionate about it. that, hey, if you come to college, whether it is for your entirety of your eligibility, or up until you're eligible for the draft, that you're going to be better off for it. And he makes that claim very, very clear. I mean, it's 1 year, but I'd say with Iquez, he's much better for being at Hawaii for a year than maybe toiling through single A or rookie ball somewhere. I mean, we saw his batting average climb month of April into early May. Defensively at third, I'm excited to see how the rest of the conference looks at him at third base. He was spectacular there. That kind of ability, you don't get to play every day in single A or in rookie ball. You're sharing time, you're sharing reps. And so he's a big believer on that. And I think you'll see more and more of that with kids who, because Hawaii's been burned by a recruiting class that, kids recruit, they commit, and then the draft comes around and they say, actually I'll go to the draft instead. 20 rounds makes it interesting now. And I think Coach Hill is going to be, deploying that belief a lot to try to keep a lot of those guys here.
And then the last point, I had this conversation with Dave Serrano on the broadcast, a Sunday broadcast at Santa Barbara Senior Day broadcast, about the league in and of itself. 11 teams might be too many, because you get, anchors at the bottom of the league. And, it's cyclical, obviously. There are teams that work once good that aren't, that have a rough time. But you can't have – that's the difference. You look at the old Pac-12, what they did this year. I think of the teams in that league, 7 or 8 of them were in the top 100 RPI, whereas once you get past a certain time – and, I give Fullerton a pass because they won the league last year, but they were hovering down around 190. When you have teams 250, 270, that just kills you, and that, to me – that makes what Irvine and Hawaii and Santa Barbara did so much more impressive, that you had those anchors pulling down your RPI. I think the Big West still finished with 4 teams in the top 100 in RPI. I think CSUN was like 90 something. Hawaii was in the 70s, and obviously the 2 teams that got in, Irvine and Santa Barbara. I think San Diego topped that. They were somewhere around 130, and then Cal Poly was in there, and Davis was kind of hovering outside the top 100 for most of the year. But those teams at the bottom, and Coach Serrano came out and said it. He goes, this 11 may be too much for a league like the Big West.
Yeah, I'm mixed on it, because I look at a Cal State Bakersfield, and good luck to Jeremy Beard, who was let go there earlier this week. Resource wise, Cal State Bakersfield is a real question mark. We've seen, and you and I mean, I've been to the ballpark. We've talked to their SIDs, and we've talked to Coach Beard, and they don't, resource-wise, they don't compete at the same level as the Santa Barbaras and the Cal Polys. But yet, Hawaii goes to Cal State Bakersfield and gets walked off on a Sunday.
There you go. No, exactly. Yeah, of course.
And that's the thing. Like, Cal State Bakersfield was one of the toughest outs in the first 2 months of the conference year. Their record was bad, but they had really good starting pitching, and they were really, really, really tough to sweep. Problem is, bigger picture, their record is what it was. UC Riverside, and I feel I feel for Coach there, because they've consistently had it tough, the last few years, and yet Hawaii goes to UC Riverside last year and loses 2 of 3. Right. So,
and see, that's the thing, is I remember when Troy Percival was there, and Justin Johnson's a friend, and I think he's a really good baseball man. But when Troy was there, the teams also struggled a little bit in terms of the Big West standings, but they'd always they owned Santa Barbara. The 5 years Troy was there, they were 10-5 against the Gauchos, who were from 2015 to 2019, they were probably the best team in the Big West consistently. But so we don't have that anymore, though. That's the whole thing, is there's not that evening out against the other teams. But I did not know that they had let Coach Beard go. I was always a fan of his. He was always very generous with me. And again, they're in a tough spot. He's not there anymore, so I think I can reveal this. Okay. They weren't fully funded scholarship wise. They were well below the limit. 11.7 is the limit, and they were well below it. Is Hawaii fully funded in terms of scholarships, Josh? Do you know?
I believe Hawaii is, yes.
Okay. because that makes it tough, you know.
Yeah, and Coach Beard, I'm with you. I wish him luck. He was always good to me. But I think that's where the tournament is supposed to come into play now, right? Where you get toward the back end, all right, we've weeded out those that can't cut it. We're gonna get to, I think, top 5, right? And we're gonna play it out from there. And so,
which this year would have been fantastic.
Yes,
because the league is so good this year. And UC San Diego would not, they're not. That's the whole thing about them not being eligible is I don't want to relitigate that.
Garbage.
But this is what hurts, and I think this is what hurts Hawaii too. From my perspective with CSUN, is them not being able to take advantage of or put themselves in a position to be in the postseason this year. You're losing a bunch of guys. You're going to lose Simons. You're probably going to lose Fitzer. There's always that. Like, I did not think Grayson Tarlow was going to get drafted last year. There's always the one guy you don't think is going to get drafted that then gets drafted and has a decision to make. And I would say the same thing with Hawaii. There was kind of the stars aligned for the Bows to have that run at the end. And baseball, like we talk about, is the cruelest of all sports because you never know. I mean, look at Cal State Fullerton. What happened with them?
Yeah, I think, man, it everything aligned really well. Just wasn't, in this year, you just ran into Irvine and Santa Barbara, and those were the only 2 series you lose. You get swept. I mean, just imagine if you were to win one of those series, or take one from each. Maybe we're talking about things a little bit differently. I will throw this out on the on the tournament though, is that if I looked at these 5 teams, as much as I think any of them could have beaten anybody, I still think for it, hypothetically, if Cal Poly or CSUN or Hawaii were to get a 3rd berth to the Big West, it would have to be by winning it. I don't think they could. I don't think they could get to a final and lose and get one of those at-larges, because I still think the West region is not respected enough.
Now, if Hawaii on a neutral site could have gotten wins against Santa Barbara and Irvine in a tournament situation, even if they didn't win, that may have helped in the committee's eyes to lift them up. And the weird thing, I think, if they played out this year, that 4 or 5 game would have been Hawaii and CSUN.
That's right.
So
that would have been a banger of a game.
Yeah, and then so all kinds of strategy comes in then, right? Well, for Rich, who do you throw, right? Do you throw your Friday guy, knowing that you're gonna have to play, in a day? Do you take that risk, right? Knowing that I think Hawaii's pitching was a little bit deeper than CSUN's this year.
And Hawaii never really had it. Well, Hawaii had a true Friday guy. Didn't work out in Harrison Bodendorf in the first month. In fact, he entered the portal earlier this week, and then it was a revolving door. That's what would have made that 5-4 interesting. Do you throw in the revolving door, or do you take your Saturday guy, Randy Abshire III, and throw him in and say, hey, winner take all, or there's no tomorrow. Rich's whole thing is it's game 7 mentality. We throw someone out there, don't leave anything for the swim home. That's one of his catchphrases. Abshire would have been that guy potentially. So I think that factors in. I think the one other thing, and I know this is probably off topic, but you and I are like this with conversations all the time. I think the baseball selection committee needs an overhaul. I think we need to do what the college football playoff selection committee has. We need some coaches. We need coaches who understand baseball more than athletic directors who understand math. Because I think if that were the case, I think the RPI could be there, or use the DSR or whatever it is you want to use, fine. But I don't feel confident that a lot of these ADs are watching baseball across the country. I don't feel confident that they're staying up and watching the West region. Whereas I think a coach who just, or a couple of coaches, who love the game, I think wouldn't mind staying up and, or they're based on the West Coast, whatever it is, wouldn't mind staying up and watching CSUN. Well, once you guys get lights, CSUN, right. Or watching UC Santa Barbara, or watching UC Irvine, or watching Cal Poly, and seeing what those teams are capable of in a setting that, let's not look at their RPI or strength of schedule for these next 3 hours, and let's just see how good this team is and make an argument that is better reflective of what the best 64 team should look like as compared to the best 64 based on strength of schedule. And I promise you, it may not have anything to do with Hawaii. I look at Lamar more than I look at Hawaii. I think we talked about it earlier. I look at Cal.
Like Kent State last year. Kent State last year.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think you'd see, at least for 3 and 4 seeds, I think you might see a total overhaul of how that looks.
And, one of the greatest things for me, and I'm sure for you, is, you're calling a game and you get a text from Dave Serrano, or I get a text from Doug Smith, because the coaches are watching. The coaches are definitely watching. And you bring up that's a great point to bring up, because here's the problem, right? Somebody says, well, okay, I saw Hawaii in February play Ole Miss, and I saw them play NC State. Or somebody else says, I saw that first weekend in March when CSUN was at Oregon State. But now you're 2 months later, right? And that, so if you're and that's, I've seen that, maybe it was on one of your Twitter, people are arguing about that. Well, the win over Ole Miss was, but I'm like, but now it's been 2 months of baseball, like 18 of 20, 16 of 17. Somebody needs to be watching that. And a lot of those games, where it jumped out at me was when Hawaii went to UC San Diego and swept them on the road. And then, that was the weekend before CSUN went to Honolulu, and they got swept as well. And then all of a sudden the Bows were off and running. So that is actually a great point in terms of how the committee approaches it. And maybe we need to rethink the committee in the sense that get some input from coaches who've played these. That's what you and I do.
Yeah.
When we're going to, hey, coach, I remember CSUN was playing San Diego State. And San Diego State's record wasn't very good, but they've been picked, I think, to finish in the top 3 in the league. So I text John Ramey and I text Paul Loeffler. I'm like, okay, give me the breakdown. You guys know these teams. You guys know the conference. What happened? And then they gave me varying explanations. And that's maybe a little bit of how you can improve on what's going on. But again, I thought the Bows had an incredible year, and like we talked about, it's just disappointing we won't see them beyond the regular season in the Big West. But I think we're all optimistic, and we're all looking forward to the Big West Baseball Championships next year at Fullerton. I'll bring this up only because I had Serrano on, and he does not like the 5-team format, which I love. Dave thinks it should be a 6-team format. Maybe it's because I'm a Yankee fan. I remember that Bucky Dent Boston game. I love the notion of the winner take all at 4-5. What are your thoughts?
I'm right with you. And I think you don't want to oversaturate. I think especially in the Big West, I think there are some years where that number 6 team does not belong. Yeah. I feel confident enough that every year the top 5 in the Big West will deserve to play more baseball. I mean, what do we have at 6? I think it was this year. Was it Long Beach? I think that finished in 6th. But I think
CSUN finished 6th.
Oh, that's right.
If you count UC San Diego,
that's right. I'm sorry. I keep thinking of CSUN as much better than that record. But in this case, I mean, if it were this year, I would feel like all 6 of those teams would compete. But I don't know that I'd feel the same way every year. So I'd rather take the side of caution and say, you know what, 5 teams is good. But I also believe the first couple of years in this, use it as like a pilot program. And if you notice that as you keep going on, that number 6 team is consistently good. And maybe, maybe that number 6 team consistently has an RPI that is hanging around 110. Well, you know what? Hey, why not? Why not make it a little more competitive and go to 6? But I think right now is perfect. It is best representative of what the conference is. And I think that's what your tournament should be. Not like the SEC where everybody goes and you play over 6 days. No, let's make it very much representative of what the conference looks like to best get your chances of getting more teams in.
And I do want to reward the people who are good in the regular season. Mm-hmm. Like absolutely. I want, if Hawaii and Cal Poly are playing that last weekend for number 3, let's make it a dogfight, man. Like make that 3. An 11-team league. If you finish in the top 3, you're a pretty good baseball team.
Absolutely.
Not to say that if you finish fourth or fifth, you're not, but like this year, the top 3 teams in the Big West were all very good baseball teams.
No doubt.
So that's what I like. And again, I do like the idea of, all right, play your way in, and now it's a regional, so if you finish fifth, you're not a top 3 team, but you still get an opportunity to slide in. And I have the coaches that did a tremendous job coming up. And it was the coaches that wanted that format. So that's part of the other reason I kind of respect the format. If these coaches all put their heads together and say this is what it should be, I'm on board with it.
Absolutely. No arguments there.
ESPN Honolulu, Josh Pacheco, where can we hear you? Are you on daily? You're on daily, right?
I'm on daily. We have a show called Off the Bench, 6 to 9 Pacific, 3 to 6 Hawaii time. So we're on Monday through Friday when we're not preempted by the NBA playoffs or stuff like that. So, yeah, come by, say hello, call in if you want. We have a lot of fun.
It's a wonderful show. I'm not just saying that because Josh has had me as a guest. The funniest thing, Josh, is I love when you're doing Hawaii football because the interaction with fans becomes unhinged. And I say that in a good way, because they carry it over to your Twitter feed sometimes.
Yes.
That's some of the most entertaining stuff that I see on Twitter, is because it's, because people forget the Bows are the pro team. So it's like USC or Alabama. That is the expectation of that fan base.
Not to disappoint, I've learned to get away from the Twitter beefs recently.
Okay.
I've learned, you know what?
You're always very professional.
I have to be better. Save it for the radio. So that's
fair.
Yeah. But you know what? Hawaii basketball has been very topical recently. Hawaii hasn't made an NCAA tournament in quite some time, hasn't won the Big West in quite some time. Baseball's been more topical recently, and volleyball is always topical. This is a really good time to be around Hawaii athletics when pretty much every major sport is a sport in which you're really not apathetic about it. People are involved, whether it's the highs or the lows, and it's really good to be around.
And you guys have a great, friends of the broadcast, yourself, Tiff, obviously Kanoa, and my favorite guy, is your broadcast partner. Well, I'm a Harrison guy. I think Harrison's very good, but Scott Robbs, man, that guy is the legend, as they say on the island. Yeah.
Scott is the brother or the father. He's my dad's age. That I never had. We can make bits out of peanut M&Ms, and we can spar over the like of our favorite or dislike of our respective football teams, and the like of our shared favorite Major League Baseball team, which is the San Francisco Giants. But it is never a dull moment in the booth, and I will always credit Scott for opening me up as a play-by-play guy and freeing me from at times not having to feel so serious. I have had the most fun in my career working with Scott, and then Harrison coming in and expanding, on that. That's why Hawaii baseball has been my absolute joy and privilege to be around now for the last 6 years, 7 filling in for Scott, working with Jim Leahy. Thrill of my life.
You guys do a wonderful job. You're always a fun listen, and like with us, the tangents are always so compelling between you and Scott. The arguments you get into. That is Josh Pacheco talking a little NCAA baseball and the Bows, and the one plus of our conference, among many pluses. I get to visit Honolulu once a year and kind of see you in your natural habitat. We'll hold the phone on those other jobs. I'm hearing there may be another job on the way for you, but always appreciate the time, my friend. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you, my friend. See you soon.